Good evening, good morning, good afternoon for everyone for tuning in today from wherever the world you're tuning in from. Thank you for joining us. This is the first virtual quarterly meetup at Gaming Americas. It's nice to have you all back. Shout out to the almost 1,000 viewers on YouTube as well. It's nice to have you all here. We decided to make this option as a permanent option for everyone who wants to get the latest updates from the North American, Latin American markets, and we're doing it once again quarterly. So without any further delay, I would like to invite my panelists to come on screen. All right. So let's dive in. I have the pleasure to moderate the first panel today before I hand over the virtual microphone to Jeremy. So the first panel is about striking the balance between acquisition and retention. And this panel will discuss how operators can strike the right balance between acquisition and retention. Hopefully my voice is being heard correctly because I have these new orthodontic bracelets, so I'm getting used to them. So it's kind of, I talk a little bit funny. But it's nice to have here Tom Galanis, CEO at Tag Media and First Look Games. Hi, Tom. It's nice to see you.
Hi, everyone.
Jon Bowden, Chief Marketing Officer at Playstar Gaming Group. Hi, John.
Hi.
Domenico Mazzola, Director of Sales at Flows, not at Altenar, as some of the marketing materials stated. Hi, Domenico.
Hello, everybody.
And last but not least, Allan Petrilli, VP of Sales and Growth at Intelitics. Nice to see you again, Allan.
Hey, man. Nice to see you again. Thanks for having me.
All right. So before we dive into the questions, I just want to give the opportunity for you guys to introduce yourself to the audience. Maybe some of them don't know you that well. So let's do it like we did with the introductions. Let's start up with Tom.
Awesome. Well, again, like Allan said, it's great to be here too. It's a privilege to be alongside such industry luminaries and to have such a great audience listening in as well. So I run two businesses called Tag Media and First Look Games. Tag Media do several things. We're an affiliate digital consultancy, but we're also a publisher in our own right. We operate an affiliate site called US Odds, which we service the New Jersey sportsbook and the US DFS market. We also do some casino acquisition through paid media, but we're also an affiliate in the UK as well, where our focus is very much on revenue share. And there's some long-standing partnerships through a site called Punters Lounge, which was founded in 1999. So we're coming at an angle, at least from an affiliate perspective, of seeing what works in a very established market, where retention's obviously been hugely in play, given the competition. But we're also active, again, on a different model, through a CPA model in the US, in New Jersey. So I'm very interested to have the discussion around acquisition and retention. Again, our background is acquisition, but we understand why retention is very, very important.
All right, thank you so much, John.
Hi all. Yeah, just to echo what Tom said, great to be alongside some esteemed faces that I know very well and some new ones as well. So yeah, I'm Jon Bowden, Chief Marketing Officer at Playstar. So Playstar is a new online casino we launched in August of last year in New Jersey. We've got plans to expand this year in North America, first of all in Pennsylvania, and then later, hopefully this year, in Indiana. And I myself, I've been working in iGaming for the best part of 15 years now, always on the operator side. And always before joining Playstar earlier last year in the UK market. Most recently, I was at Entain, where I managed the UK arm of the business for slots, casino, and bingo. And for me, it's going to be very interesting to see how the US develops. I'm looking forward to the conversation today to see what the balance is between acquisition and retention. Obviously, in the UK market, retention and driving a sustainable business through recreational base has been kind of forced upon the industry, and it's not quite hit the US yet, with such a big focus on acquisition. And actually, is retention waning, and something that we're trying to do a little bit differently at Playstar. So yeah, looking forward to the chat and great to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be an awesome discussion since we have two Italians. I think Allan Petrilli is also sounds a bit Italian. So Domenico, you're next up with the introduction.
Yes, well, as everybody has already noticed by my name and probably during the conversation by my accent, I am Italian, yes, and I am currently the sales director at Flows. And we help companies, both B2B and B2C operators in our industry, and not only, to speed up their development process and to automatize certain process with Flows, giving the chance to build features without having to rely on developers. So I'm really looking forward to have these conversations with all the people involved in this panel today, because I think that it's really interesting to understand a little bit more how US operators are handling the tough competition that is actually happening in that market, and what kind of tools and procedures, and I would say also people, could use to achieve that.
All right, thank you, Domenico. Allan.
Hey everyone, I'm Allan Petrilli, half Italian, VP of Sales at Intelitics. We're a tracking analytics and BI platform, both for iGaming operators and for some publishers and networks in the space to help them power not only their affiliate channel, but all their user acquisition. So we're obviously more focused on the acquisition side, but definitely have some opinions around what's going on in the US market, and incredibly excited for the quality of the panel that we're about to present, or at least my colleagues will.
All right, so now everyone knows who we are talking with today, and I will dive into the questions already and throw you guys into deep sea. Is retention just as important as acquisition, and why? Tom, would you like to start?
I'm so glad I get this question first. Well, yeah, obviously it is. And I think operators in the US are finding that out. Perhaps they should have found it out a little bit sooner. But obviously, the landscape in the US is very, very different. I'm just conscious of the fact that all five of us, none of us are actually American. And being Canadian, of course, because you didn't know. So we've got kind of a bit of a free rein to pick the market apart here without offending each other. And we may offend some people on the call. But to me, retention is obviously vital. It is obviously what underpins profitability, which is a new buzzword in the US, so I'm told. I did actually hear that BetMGM are tracking towards a positive EBITDA for the first ever time this year, meaning I think one of the first top operators to achieve that, or if they do achieve that. And that's in no small part thanks to their, I guess, a bit more of a focus on retention. We're all aware of the huge marketing spend that's been undertaken in acquisition and above the line brand marketing. I would classify those two things as two different things. But yeah, obviously coming from a UK background, as Jon does as well, and as someone that's been in the affiliate space for nearly 2 decades, for us, we've operated largely on revenue share until the point we entered the US market. And so we are fully aware of the importance of retention to drive lifetime value of customers, which obviously underpins profitability. It's far cheaper to retain a customer than it is to acquire one, particularly in the US market. So if you're an operator, big or small, in the US, you have to work incredibly hard to retain customers, as obviously more competition comes to market in a rollout of states that's probably not as voluminous as everyone would have hoped by this stage of proceedings. So short answer, yes, retention is as important, if not more important than acquisition. Saying that as an affiliate.
All right, Jon.
Yeah, I would echo pretty much everything that Tom said there. From an acquisition sense, going into the US market, the CPAs are, of course, eye-watering, but then again, the value is there, right? And it makes absolutely zero sense just focusing laser focus on first-time depositors, on FTDs, if you're not going to activate these players and you're not going to keep these players on for a sustained period of time. It costs a hell of a lot more to acquire a player in terms of bonus, top of the funnel, what you need to do to get that player with you initially. rather than it does to keep a player, with you, engage with you, and keep that share of wallet. And that's hugely important. On the flip side of that as well, it costs a huge amount to reactivate a player as well. And you can have a huge pool of these new players that come in, churning at a rate of knots. And then you're at two opposite ends of the cost funnel, where you've got huge costs to acquire these players in terms of bonus, CPAs, everything else that goes along with it. And then on top of that, you've got a huge cost to try and activate them. So obviously retention is key. It's a very unique industry that we work in. We're not looking at kind of 1 or 2 sales a year. Loyalty is really driven of keeping a player active month on month, and the tactics and from a bonus sense, loyalty scheme, engaging products that you can do to stand out from the competitor set and keep players with you. I feel coming in from UK market previously, and as I say, at Playstar, we try and do things a little bit differently, where it's a little bit more evolved in terms of our methods. Applying that to the US market, it still feels very new, and still feels a little bit untapped. And as people start looking under the hood of that, and again, Tom referencing BetMGM there, is a really key point in the fact that actually I think people are getting a little bit more switched onto it. And then you've got to remember, from BetMGM, that relationship with Entain, I'm sure there's a lot of input on that side as well in terms of the models and methods you can use. I know we'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, again, in short summary, absolutely, there's no point in paying these huge CPAs, huge bonus costs to get players in at the top if you're not going to keep hold of them. So retention is absolutely as important.
Since you mentioned Entain, Martin Lichka is going to be on the next panel, so maybe some insight in there too. So Domenico, same question.
Well, what I would like to add to what was already been said is that, first of all, of course, actually probably retention is even more important than acquisition, because you can acquire all the customers that you want, but as John already mentioned, if you cannot manage to convert them and actually to keep them active on your website, then there is no much value on them. On top of that, I would like to move aside a bit on the conversation, saying that I would say we are lucky to work in one of probably the best industry we could work on, and it's not gaming. We work in the entertainment industry, which means that if we see it from that perspective, we are already expanding the spectrum of the competition. So that's where retention becomes even more and more important, because at the end of the day, we are fighting against other companies that are not coming from the gaming industry, and they are not our direct competitors, but they are competing for the same thing, which is players' time. Because if I'm spending 1 hour on a casino, I might not spend that hour on Netflix or on Amazon or on studying something new, learning a new skill, for example. Then the next question would be, do we have the skills to handle that? Do we have the technical knowledge? Do we have the tools to be able to retain the customers? Because sometimes we see big companies that clearly have the process in their minds. They have people with knowledge. They know exactly, let's say, how to build a retention campaign. They know exactly how to build a customer journey. So they drive you through the process. If the customer doesn't deposit, let's say, doesn't make any first deposit after 7 days, to do something to send an email. But in many occasions, and see from my small experience, then many companies are struggling with the implementation of those campaigns because the technology is old, the software they're using is maybe not so flexible, and they have to integrate a third party, which is adding an additional complexity, additional time, and so on and so forth. So I would say that definitely retention is more important than acquisition, but more important is even further to have the tools to have the chance to do retention properly, because otherwise it's difficult to compete not only against DraftKings or against the big operators in the US, but even with outsiders that are even bigger than FanDuel and the other big 2-3 operators in the US that have even better technology than us.
All right. Thank you. Allan?
I'm going to not disagree with everyone on the panel, but I'm going to say I honestly think it's a marriage between both. And I think at the end of the day, we have a lot of conversations about what's more important, acquisition or retention. And at the end of the day, I think together they empower each and they educate each. And I think it's incredibly important to be looking at them together in an ecosystem. And and I'm not saying that as an acquisition company. I think just in general, you need to be acquiring the right players that match your brand, that will remain loyal to you, that are targeted in a way that matches what you're offering them. And at the same time, you need to be able to do retention in a way that is unique and personalized to the type of player that you're acquiring, right? We can all, and I say we, I'm not an operator, but if I was an operator, every operator, and we have obviously one on the panel, can dream of acquiring the highest quality player all day long. But at the end of the day, that's not going to happen, right? Your goal in acquisition is to acquire the right player at the right price and then be able to extract most value out of them. And the goal for retention is, how do I keep people around? But we obviously know, based on data, that people are going to jump around from brand to brand. So it's, how do you retain a share of their wallet at the end of the day? Not necessarily how do you retain all of them, which goes back to acquisition. You need to be constantly driving new acquisition, knowing that players are going to be leaving your competing brand. So I think if you're not looking at both together and building strategies around how do I personalize retention towards the player I acquired and the channel that I brought them from, and vice versa, I think you're going to struggle. And I don't know that anyone in the US is doing that where it needs to be at. I will say this, Playstar is an active client of ours, and obviously they were very interesting when they first launched with us, given their outlook on it. And I can let John go into detail on that, but I think, and sometimes challenger brands have the ability to be able to be more flexible and quick to market with this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I don't think you could ever be looking at both in a bubble. And I'm not saying that anyone on the panel said that. I just think at the end of the day, they both empower each other, and you don't have retention without acquisition, and you cannot do retention without, without the other. So I think at the end of the day, it's kind of a marriage.
Spot on.
Yeah,
That's
agree with
the
that.
title of the panel. Tom, did you want to add
Yeah,
something to this?
I just want to Alan is absolutely right. And it's actually something we do all too often in the gaming industry, both in dialogue, both in comment, and actually in terms of running businesses as well. It's actually probably been one of the biggest failings, I suppose, of more established markets, and something that I guess, if the wrong learnings are taken into the US market, you might see there as well, is an overzealous approach to silo off divisions, a fundamental day-to-day work level. You have an acquisition team, may not even talk to the retention team, may not talk to the product team. These things I've seen come to pass all too often in more established markets. And the very fact we're having this question put in front of us, acquisition retention, which is more important? Alan is absolutely spot on. We cannot silo the two away from each other. All the data, the customer flow between those two things, is to get that right across both. It's absolutely vital, and the most successful operators in established markets have achieved that. And those who have spent way too much money, both in established markets and in US markets, have burned a lot of money in that way. So Alan's definitely spot on. The two are hand in hand together.
All right. So, question for the panel, and just raise your hands if you want to answer this. Based on your experience, of course, in the US market, do you think that US operators are currently striking the right balance between the two, the retention and acquisition? And if not, why is this the case? So who wants to take this question? All right,
I'll kick us off. Yeah. In all honesty, no, I don't think operators are in the US. I think there is an obsession around brand awareness and a perceived market share. And I think with that, it's very heavily steered towards getting the brand out there, and then, of course, getting signups. I think when you look at a lot of the operators across the US, you have kind of you're either a VIP or you're not. You're everyone else. And obviously, the requirement with a lot of operators are you're quite high to fall into the VIP category. And with that, true retention isn't being achieved. And actually looking at other markets and how they, I think, I completely agree, by the way, with what Allan and Tom say there around the the even kill between the two, and actually you can't look at one without the other. And I've been with operators, I'm sure other members of the panel have, or worked with other partners, whereby the acquisition team, once they've got their first deposit, that's it. Scrub my hands with it. I don't care. That's not my problem. That's now the CRM team's problem to extract the value, which actually is a complete misnomer, of course, because if they don't extract the value, then your CPA just looks ludicrous. And why are we not extracting the value from that player? There's only so much you can do from getting a first time deposit in. So the big focus there is around volume. You've got these huge pools of players that have played in land-based casino if the state hasn't been regulated yet, and no sports book, and actually the education piece is already there. It's been done. And actually, when they're coming, what operators are looking for is just people to come through, just getting bums on seats. And actually, it's keeping hold of those players. I don't think it's been really tapped into. And yeah, the first deposit is really half the battle, and the other half is absolutely around retaining those players. And at the moment, if everything that I read and go to, and going to some great events and seeing what panelists say in presentations, it's all around, oh, we've got this amount of brand awareness, the brand was out there. And it's like, well, of course the brand was out there. It's a casino brand with 100 years of legacy, and you partner with the NBA and the NFL, of course you're going to get the brand name out there. It's actually not just acquiring those players because they've seen something in huge welcome offers as well. It's actually, how do we keep hold of players, and what differentiators do we have around retention schemes that others may not have? Because frankly, pretty much everyone has the same products, right? It's what differentiates you to everyone else. And at the moment, the focus is absolutely around huge bonuses. Let's get people through the door.
Yeah. Anyone wants to add to this?
I was just going to add, look, I think the US is an incredibly unique market. I think at the end of the day, we've seen regulation in a bunch of countries internationally, but no one's quite done it like the US scale, right? You had a huge kind of black market, which we all thought, and Tom and I've had this conversation 100 times, I thought sports betting was native to Americans before, and it was to some, but there are a ton of customers who just weren't betting before because they either didn't know where to go or they didn't trust some of the offshore books. Like there's a huge, your casual bettor didn't exist to the degree that it exists now in the US market. And I think, and to give maybe a little bit of, to support some of the brands a little bit in the US with what everyone's been talking about, the crazy spend, and we agree, I think there's been a very illogical spend to date across a lot of brands. But at the end of the day, there's been a competition for how do we get live in a state as quickly as possible because it's regulating. In order to do that, we know we have to spend X amount because the top 3 or 4 are spending X amount. And if you're in that group, you need to continue to spend to keep up. And if you're not, you need to spend to get there. And then also you're just trying to gain as many players as you can because the market's still very new. That retention and a million other things have been pushed to the back. That could include improving funnels. That could include improving promotions. There's a million different things that have kind of been pushed to the side. And a lot of that, I think, comes down to there was genuinely kind of a lack of talent in the US market because of how new the industry is. And also, at the end of the day, the market's very new. And when a market's new, what's your goal? Acquire as many users as you can, and we'll worry about retaining them afterwards. And that's not to say that it's right, but that's just a reality of kind of what's happened. And I think now you're seeing a lot more of these conversations and a lot more of a shift to how do we actually retain value because of downward pressure on markets, from markets on brands turning profitable. And at the end of the day, I think now is where you're going to start seeing a huge shift. And I'm really excited for it because we've seen what it can do in markets where brands focus on retention.
All right, Tom, I think you want to add to this.
Yeah, again, like what Allan said, I think, if you look historically at the US market, what you will have seen is customers who will have bet on sports would have, through need more than anything else, been very loyal to the sports that they bet with, and somewhat patient with the processes that sportsbook, an offshore one that struggle to get payments in and out of, hence why you don't usually use more than one of them. There is that sort of organic loyalty that perhaps you wouldn't see in more established markets like the UK, and perhaps a patience of product as well. But I think, we'll get on talking about products in a second, but, a lot of the bigger sports books in the US are built on fairly archaic PAM systems with limited marketing functionality. I know Don wants to get on this one, but it does mean that either by accident or design, the bigger brands who sit on these platforms are incapable, and that might be a strategic thing, but it might be simply down to the product to actually engage customers in the way that they might like and might need to communicate with them on a to a degree of frequency that they want to, and connect with them in the right ways beyond shouting about the brand. Without hammering the US too much, what you see in the US is big, loud, and not very nuanced, a bit like the car industry there. I'd say that as a Tesla owner.
Domenico, would you like to add as well?
Well, I think that all the main points were covered by the others. In general, yes, in my opinion, there is a thin line between, let's say, the fact that it's true that the US market is relatively a new one. So also, let's say, both the players and I would say the online operators are navigating new waters. So they are experimenting new things. Again, we will touch the product part later on during the discussion, which in my opinion is still a very critical point, a very key point, because as already Tom said, the majority of the big operators in the US, but I would include even more operators, even not only the big ones, are using very old technology. And probably the main and the biggest challenge is to experiment new things, is to try a new campaign, is to try, let's say, a new functionality using a new trigger that with these platforms requires maybe months of development. It's very difficult to identify immediately the return of investment of implementing or even to make a test. So many times people get frustrated, even let's say employees of these big operators, they get frustrated because they don't have the tools, they don't have the power to make this test. And so everything is moving very slow, and they just push on brand awareness because it's the easiest thing, because they just need to put money on the marketing budget to pay an influencer. And we also saw it not so long ago about a brand that engaged with a very famous person to get let's say players, and now it's not operating anymore. So
Dom, can I ask Dom a question there, or just my opinion, and I'm sure he agrees?
Sure.
Is for an industry that's spending billions of dollars on marketing and perceived user acquisition, and then needing to spend quite a lot more on retention and not currently doing it, to me, it seems counterintuitive to not spend less than 1% of that on the proper technology to allow you to properly execute that, right? And I mean, I'm obviously self-promoting here. Our technology helps on the acquisition side. What you guys do helps everywhere. There's great, tools on the retention side that are just starting to make headways in the industry. And it seems to me that we're one of the industries that jumps kind of head first into spend without having the proper technology operational to be able to help you control that properly. And to me, I find that, when the industry first launched in the US, it was one thing, but I feel like, we're coming up against 10 years of a market that's been open, and we're still light years behind. And to me, I think that is one of the things that still kind of confuses me, that brands are willing to spend as much as they do without having the proper technology in place to be able to make sure that you're turning a positive ROI on it.
So, well, Allan, Zoltán, if I can answer the question in general, what is true is that we have to separate, in my opinion, there are two big categories in terms of technology and software in our industry, which one are, let's say, I call them the third parties and the plugins, which of course represent a small part of a whole operation, which require always a main component, which is a PAM.
Yeah.
And in general, these days, we are seeing, if we are talking about, let's say, the main operators now currently working in the US, they are all using a technology that was created like 10 years ago, something like that. So they were built with a very, let's say, monolithic approach, very not so flexible, let's put it in this way, and they were just patched and patched and patched through the years to reach a point that even to release a small change, it could affect the whole system, and probably the people that will know where to touch it are not even there anymore. So in many cases, we are seeing, let's talk about the palm industry for a second. We are seeing companies with 2, 3, 4 different platforms, okay, because of acquisitions or even because they couldn't manage to make their existing technology up to date with the new frameworks, with the new functionalities, and with the new possibilities that the market is offering, that they have to build one from scratch. And building one from scratch, it means automatically almost duplicating the team. So it's not only about the money, it's also about the complexity, about the cost. And most probably, I want to, let's say something maybe a little bit provocative. All the big operators, in a way or in another, are making money. So at the end of the day, most probably they prefer to spend money in acquisition, in things that are easier, rather than say, okay, you know what, let's scrap the system that we have, and we build one from zero. So probably this is the thing that I'm perceiving based on my experience working for platforms in the past, plus, let's say, dealing with many player account management system companies in these days.
All right, so you guys mentioned the return of the investment, and it's something that concerns many of the US operators there because they are not hitting it and they are seeking to do it. But what are the consequences of being too focused on acquisition? Because I think we said this, right? That they are focusing too much focusing on acquisitions, right? But what are the consequences if you're being too focused on acquisition?
Well, I think,
Go ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead, Dom.
Yeah. I think, the biggest issue at play is obviously, as states roll out, there's a gold rush. People desperate to get to market to get their size of the pie. But to echo Dom's point, they're turning up to this gold rush with a massively expensive plastic shovel. It is not very effective, and it's the technology that supports most operator systems. But you've got to get there. If you're not there with that big plastic shovel, you're not there at all. And you could be working in the background, developing your own PAM system, which might become very out of date very quickly, depending on what the next state allows you to do or permits you to do. And so you'd rather be there. If you're a big brand that has, already made a decent footprint in one market, you want to be the next one. And that's what you're seeing. You've got 3 huge operators that, are front and center of spending tens of millions of dollars entering these states. You got smaller brands doing it a lot smarter, but you can't keep up with the rate of spend. So I think these guys are there and they're spending their money because they can. They want to maintain that market share, that brand space share. Whether or not they're doing the work in the background to improve the retention, I guess time will tell on them. It seems 1 or 2 of the operators are. I think New York was obviously a huge lesson in that regard. That state caught many people out in terms of what they could do promotionally, probably what their systems allowed them to do promotionally with very prohibitive tax rates. And it's got people thinking slightly differently, but still, the bigger brands who have carved out large market share are going to continue to spend a lot of money. Is that wrong? No, they can do it. As long as their shareholders are happy, it's fine. It does mean that it's going to be a smaller market. There will be fewer operators that survive. We've seen 1 or 2 pull out, or even pull out recent license applications. So it's working for those that spend the money. For those wanting to come in who don't have that brand equity, it's difficult.
All right.
I think I don't love the notion of brands are spending too much focus on acquisition. I think the challenge in the market is that they are spending a ridiculous amount of money without both having the acquisition tools in place to be able to optimize that spend towards profitability. And then on the flip side, not having the proper retention tools, techniques, and focuses in place to be able to withdraw the most quality from a player, right? And so at the end of the day, I don't think we'd be having this conversation if everyone was profitable in the market. I think they would say, of course, everyone should be spending more and focusing more on acquisition because it's profitable. I think the challenge in the market is that people are spending non-profitably and don't have the tools on both ends to be able to get to, or not that they don't have the tools, they are not currently utilizing the tools and the expertise to be able to extract most value. And I think if we get to a point where more brands are profitable, then everyone's going to go back to why are they not spending more if they're turning more of a profit, right? So I think that's kind of the situation we're in right now in the market.
And just on top of that, I think it's also spending on the right acquisition channels as well. Nobody would be going live without knowing exactly where their traffic is coming from on the most part. But actually, there's a lot of operators out there and a lot of brands that don't know why their players are staying around or why they're churning. So and one feeds the other. Getting a better understanding of your loyal active base that stays with you month on month, you can refine your acquisition strategy so significantly to then again improve your targeting, make sure you're in the right space, make sure you're activating the right channels as well. Mixed marketing is something that hasn't really been touched upon to the extent that we see in other markets in the US. What is the influence of paying on a Facebook ad, seeing actually the return on investment on that ad? Okay, well, we haven't had that many clicks, we haven't had that many FTs. Well, actually, what is that doing in terms of the whole choice of the customer, their whole journey? How much is that influencing them? So it's spending in the right channel. So yeah, it's not so much that there's too much of a focus on acquisition. It's potentially that they're leaving a lot of the retention tools at the door, or they're not utilizing them, and you're going blind, and then you don't understand actually, okay, why has this player come through the top of the funnel? Why have they decided to join? Why have they come through this search term? How can I refine my strategy? And then obviously optimizing from an acquisition sense. And obviously the biggest thing is around return on investment. If you focus too much at the top of the funnel and you're not looking at maintaining those players and keeping hold of them, of course your profitability wanes significantly.
All right. So since you guys are so smart about acquisition, I will ask you, what does a good player acquisition actually look like? And maybe you could say what are the most effective techniques as well. Let's start with Domenico. I think that he got.
Well, actually, I thought that you would have asked Allan, which is the expert in the acquisition here. But
I know, but I'm asking
start.
You first.
Yeah, of course. Well, what I think is that definitely what is important is to have defined a clear customer journey. We can call it in this way. So a player life cycle where you know exactly, let's say, first of all, as Allan mentioned already, you should be able to go on the market and look for players that can fit your brand and can fit your expectations and can fit your marketing strategy. And once you have that, you need to make sure that you have a good relationship with the affiliates and you communicate with them your expectations in order for them to drive the traffic that you're looking for. And then you need to have the tools and the procedures in place to be able to convert that customer. I was discussing with a big operator in let's say in North America, and they told me that basically they still have to do manually a job every day where they check on their system the players from the date they completed the registration until the date they make the first deposit, and check manually one by one to see which players are the ones that they didn't complete the deposit in a certain amount of days, to send again manually an email campaign for them to convince them to keep and make the first deposit. So of course, you need to have the strategy, you need to have the process, but then again, I insist on this. If I have all the strategies, I have everything in my mind, but I don't have the tools to support me and to give me analytics that can help me to understand exactly what's happening. Heat maps on the website to monitor exactly the customer journey and seeing why they're leaving. There are several, let's say, components that you have to put all in place in order to have, let's say, a complete overview and take actions. Because if you don't have data, then how can you manage to do actions on that and correct or adjust your processes?
Yeah, something that ChatGPT will resolve most probably, because it resolves everything.
Not so
in the
sure
world.
yet. Not so sure yet.
All right, Allan, knock it out of the ballpark.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. Look, at the end of the day, and it's self-promotional for us, but at the end of the day, if you don't have the proper technology in place for you to be able to track what you're doing and be able to make decisions, you're gonna have a very difficult time being profitable. And that's not me to call it operators. There are big operators in the US market that are currently sending spreadsheets to their affiliate partners. And I don't personally know what they're doing to track and be able to report on the rest of their channels, right? So we're talking affiliates. I'm not talking what are they doing in order to identify ROI on Facebook or ROI on anything they're doing out of home or ROI on anything on Google PPC. That is kind of a black box in terms of us understanding what they're currently doing. And if we look at what they're doing from an affiliate perspective, my gut feeling would be is that they're not tracking those other channels properly either, right? And I'm a huge believer that if you give marketers correct data and quick data and granular data, that they're going to work with it and they're going to make their campaigns more successful, right? So it's not only for, you know, let's look at affiliates for an example. It's not only for a head of affiliates to have access to data to be able to go to their partners and say, hey, we want you to optimize. Flip it on its head. If you're working with a partner that's buying Google PPC traffic, they need that data to be able to optimize their own campaigns so that they're turning more of a profit, so that they can continue to spend and that they're driving you profitable players. So, and that can be when you're buying yourself on Facebook and Google and all these other channels as well to have access to that data. To me, I just don't think that we're in a spot yet where they can even look at some of their campaigns and really have an understanding whether they're working or not. And a lot of them will evaluate stuff just at a channel level, like this affiliate is working or not, Facebook is working or not, when realistically you can be looking at thousands of iterations of campaigns and should be cutting the 100 that are bad, scaling the 50 that are good, maintaining some in the middle. And I don't think that we've achieved that as an industry yet. And I think you'll see brands that are doing it be able to be profitable a lot more quickly. And that's not, I'm not trying to do that from a self-promotional standpoint. I think if you talk to anyone who works at a CRM company, they'll tell you the exact same thing, right? If they have the tools in place to be able to personalize moving forward, because that's where CRM is going to get to and where retention is going to get to, they're going to be able to achieve profitability a lot faster than companies who don't do any personalization. And I use an example all the time. I use Bet365 in Canada. If they know that I'm a New York Jets fan and I'm betting on every single New York Jets game, even though I never would because I would lose a lot of money, I should have pre-populated bet slips on my account when I log in on a Sunday because they know what I'm betting on, right? And it's like, that's the level of degree we have to get to on retention and previous stuff I mentioned, acquisition, for us to really be successful. And again, like I've said, for an industry to be spending billions of dollars on user acquisition and not have the technology in place to help them, you know, analyze it, to me is, I think we're going to see a shift pretty quickly here.
If we take Domenico's answers on this, it might be a person who has to personalize that landing page for you. So that takes a lot of time. So John or Tom, who would like to go first on this one?
A personalization, or to follow up on the previous point?
The previous point, so the good
Okay.
player acquisition.
I could take that. I mean, look, part of our business is running an agency. And we operate that agency in every market, really, apart from the US at the moment. That may change. But the idea of taking somebody's budget and my first thought not being, Christ, how am I going to turn a profit with this? And seeing numbers that are in the red. I mean, just the thought of it even brings me out in cold sweat. You know, it's just not something that I can consider. I think this is largely because the relationships, and I stress that word relationship, because I don't think actually there's enough focus on relationships, partnerships between suppliers, operators, third parties, that actually get to the point where the mindset is really focused on generating a profit. The smart marketing is about generating profit. And I, you know, the affiliate market where obviously I operate, Allan operates in, is very symptomatic of that in the US, where it is a volume game. The biggest affiliates there are driving huge volume at huge CPAs. ROI? Who gives a heck? Who gives a crap? And I think, yeah, the narrative that probably portrayed back to the affiliate is, we don't care. And a lot of that is in the commercial relationship. For us, when we operate in the UK market, most of the deals we have are revenue share. Now, there are obviously barriers to that in the US from a licensing standpoint, but there really is not the appetite for the operator to engage in that path. And, commercially, I get that to an extent, but what it prohibits them from doing with their partners, I use that word, rather than affiliates, is really work on a way of maximizing value of customers and working with affiliates, not just to focus on that conversion, but also that loyalty. Now, in New Jersey, as a market, it's 10 years old this year. And there's a limited pool of players there, and there's quite a few operators scrambling for that traffic. You really want to be looking at channels which you may think are purely acquisition, start treating them from a more retention or loyalty perspective. And until that really happens, and the commercial relationships do kind of prohibit that, it's very difficult because everyone's kind of in it for themselves. And we talked about silos earlier, but break that down. That's exactly what you're seeing between suppliers, partners. There's not enough collaboration and not enough focus on actually driving profitability. So I'm quite excited in many ways that New York's been a bit of a shit show, excuse my French, because I think it's got people thinking in a different way about how to collaborate and how to evolve partnerships with suppliers and through traditional acquisition channels. Affiliates are absolutely vital to customer loyalty as well as they are to acquisition.
Yep. All right.
Yeah, just on that, I think sharing of data is key. Really understanding both on the partner side and on the operator side. Us as a brand, we're more than happy to share data to get an understanding of what's working. I think it's been mentioned around, looking at a campaign level, not looking at channels as buckets. Well, that's not working. Let's cut that out. Let's invest here. It's that really understanding what the full channel mix is doing. Just one thing to add on that, in terms of a successful acquisition plan and laydown is agility as well. And you don't have that without data. It's being able to move fast in real time, understanding what's working, understanding it quickly, and then being able to put your foot down in those channels. If what we hear a lot of the time, operators working with Excel sheets and files from a week ago of when players have come through and they look like they're of value, and you find out 2-3 days later, well, guess what, it's too late, you can't keep hold of that player. It's understanding in real time what's working and having the agility to move between channels. We talked about, as you said, some working in silos. Well, making sure that channels don't do that either. This isn't a bucket for PPC and this is a bucket for affiliates. Actually, no, you go with a greenfield environment. You acquire the right players for you, understanding what the value is fast and making sure that the CPA is, of course, working for you. So yeah, I think data is absolutely key, and being able to get that data as fast as you can in real time, obviously preferable.
Talking too much about Excel reminds me of a meme I saw that Excel is keeping the whole world, not falling apart. All right, so you guys mentioned technology. And my next question would be that either way, it's not all loom and gloom for the operators, because there are tools that you guys mentioned that are helping them create retention efforts. So what are the technologies out there that are available to operators to help them level up their retention efforts, and what makes these platforms and tools so effective? So who would like to go first on this? All right, Domenico.
Well, I would like to start, let's say, mentioning what Jon said just a few minutes ago, which is the real-time data. And the truth is that you will be surprised by the number of platforms that still don't have a stream like Kafka or RabbitMQ, and they're still relying on, let's say, APIs or even on data that are sent, as also Tom was saying, like 2-3 days with delay or even more. So in my opinion, the biggest and the most important tool is real time. You need to have access to real-time data and also triggers. You must have access to have the chance to trigger actions based on things that are happening right now. And this is not because, okay, we're discussing here retention and acquisition. but this will be key for your operation for many other aspects like fraud detection, or even to understand if a player that just started playing on your casino is a problematic player, needs support, or even to the extent that you can detect the pattern of the player and identify him as a potential VIP before he leaves the casino, or as well to connect the online operation with your land-based casino, because through geolocalization you can understand his position, you can track him, and you can send him, for example, a free bet on a specific match happening in that specific day when he is close to the stadium of the match. So there are so many things that you can do, but you cannot do them if you have access to real-time data. So this is the key part. The second part, which was already mentioned before, is the speed, is the velocity that you can develop and release and try and test a new feature. Because we all have experience in marketing as well, and we know in general how important it is to have the chance to test something new, to see result, to analyze it, and then decide to implement it or not. But in order to do that, you need to have the tool that allow you to build those features fast and to test them and see if they're worth to be left there in the main system, or maybe delete them and start from scratch again. So real-time data and speed to release new functionalities. Then the third part is to have the right people in your organization that have the skills and they have the knowledge of the industry, and maybe not only from the specific industry, but even from outside, to use those tools. Because in many cases, you have a lot of tools and you search on the market, it's full of tools. We can do almost everything today with a tool. But then, do we know how to use them? Do we know what to do with them? And how supportive is the provider of the tool in teaching the operators and the right people in that organization how to use those tools? Because once you have real-time data, once you have the possibility to release a new feature in a day rather than in months, and once you have the right people that they wake up that day with that new idea, so they have the mindset to test the new features, and they have the tool and they have the technology to support them, then everything becomes so easy, and you can even gain advantage compared to bigger operators with big money, with more budget, but they struggle on these three aspects.
All right, thank you. Good points.
I think just on that as well, around the data and testing, to properly A/B test and understand how to optimize campaigns, how to optimize journeys in real time, as you say. And one of the things as well that's pretty untapped is around modeling. That when you achieve true personalization, I think we said right at the top, a bit of a one size fits all at the moment for VIP and non-VIP. But actually true personalization for every player segment based on their product preference, based on their value, based on specifically the games they like to play, and the journeys that they take as well, and taking away those pain points. And you touch around, instant releases and really quick wins. There's so much low-hanging fruit out there in terms of improving the player journey. That, I think, as well, on top of that, is key. I know you kind of covered it there, Domenico, around data and being able to use that data through releases and testing tools as well. Hugely untapped and hugely valuable. Yeah.
If I can add something very fast, I want to give a practical example on this. We had a customer that create the possibility to monitor that if a first-time depositor, let's say I have a customer, I am a player, I register on a casino, I deposit 50 euro, I start playing casino and I am unlucky, and I lose all these 50 euro within the first 2 minutes. That casino is contacting me and making sure that I don't leave the website because I had the perception that that website was bringing me bad luck, or worst case scenario, I believe that that website is a scam. So I will go on a forum complaining about the fact that they robbed all my money, which is not true, but it doesn't matter. So that casino had the possibility, because they had the technology to release it and they had access to real-time data, to quickly implement a feature that is saving them a lot of money. And that otherwise it would have taken like months to put it in place. And maybe they will already lose the players in the meantime.
All right. Dom
I
or
think,
Allan?
can I add just one thing to Domenico there? And this might be a bit of a promotion for flows, but I think one of the things that's a huge challenge in the market now is that most PAMs, even in the entirety of the industry, but in the US market, are under so much pressure to deliver launches and markets and product promises, and by mostly no fault of their own, have in cases overpromised, underdelivered because things have come up. Their bigger clients have launched in new states. They haven't been able to ship things in the time period that they wanted to because we're technology companies and sometimes you don't ship in a time that you planned. I think we're going to see a ton of really cool, whether it's AI or new technology, specifically in the US market around personalization and other thing that's going to become available that PAMs will not have the time to integrate, or will have to prioritize where they get them integrated. So you'll have technology launch that actually won't become available to operators to use. It could be a year, it could be 2 years. I mean, we as a tracking company deal with that in terms of how quickly we can get integrated with operators, which is one of the reasons why we integrate with flows. And I think their ability to be able to get integrations done quickly, I think is going to be super cool for the industry, so that as a brand, if you want to use some sort of technology that's readily available but will be delayed a year for you, you have the ability to now be able to potentially get that a lot quicker. So I think that's going to be a huge benefit.
All right, so
you,
Domenico
Allan.
is doing his acquisition part.
I think, everything's been said around data, around personalization, around AI just now. These are pretty cool buzzwords, right? The reality is that the product offering in the US is just not ready for this stuff, as Allan just pointed out. What it needs to really sort of hark back to, and it's what Bet365 got so right around the rest of the world, is actually putting the customer at the heart of the product strategy and the operational strategy. Probably why they're not in the market that much now. You see all these brands which are actually putting their brand front and center, really leveraging a big media partnerships, sports partnerships. They're not putting the customers right in the center of what they need to be doing. Until they do that, the focus for the operator will not be to get the PAM to look at personalization, look at data, look at AI, look at all the kind of functionality and tools that other industries, as have been pointed out, are really engaging with. And the industry will be left behind unless we do that. But it's critical that operators and key individuals as operators do really focus, actually put the customer front and center of everything they do. And that comes under some Martin's on the next call, we'll talk about sort of responsibility as well, protecting customers. Again, that hasn't been mentioned. All of this, as we look to build trust in the industry, is vital. But I think we won't get anywhere with these new technologies quick enough, certainly, without really refocusing strategies, particularly product strategies, to put the customer at the heart of what everyone does.
All right, so we have Jeremy and Martin and Bill Pasquale on hold right now, but I still get the chance to ask you guys for some closing remarks for 1 minute. What's next? What would you like to add to this subject as well? Allan, let's start with you.
I think we've said a lot. I think at the end of the day, we need to get to a point as an industry where we ship tech faster. I think at the end of the day, a lot of our problems are solved by technology being adopted by brands, operators, affiliates, B2B companies. And I think we've been in this kind of like never-ending circle of, we want these products, we can't ship them, they're not ready, we can't use them. And I think, we get passed by as an industry by some of this technology, and they just move on to others because we're not able to utilize it quick enough. And I think we hopefully are going to see that shift over the next year or so, because there's a ton of technology that's sitting there readily available for use by operators that just isn't. It's not available, and I think until we get to that point, we're going to continue to struggle.
All right, Tom.
Well, for me, it's a massive wish, but for as many states as possible, obviously, not just to regulate, but to regulate sportsbook and casino unilaterally. I think that is going to be the secret to unlocking player value. Until we have that, strategies that have worked around the world are not going to work in the US when it comes to building profitability.
All right, John.
Yeah, I think people are catching up. Hopefully not too fast, because the whole ethos around Playstar is to do these things right and actually focus on the player and not just the product. I think that will be a big focus, and then focusing on the right channels that not only drive acquisition but also drive retention. I still think there's a way to go though, because as I say, it's still very much a big focus on market share, and actually profitability is starting to eke in now. But I think it's going to be the main thing that's focused on, I would say, over the next sort of 5 to 10 years.
All right, Domenico, you have the final words.
Wow. Okay. Well, I would say that Allan already covered the majority of the points that I wanted to say.
As always, in the sense that technology, in my opinion, is still the key, because it's true. You need to have the processes, you need to have the strategy, but you need to have the technology to support and to have the chance to implement those strategies that you build around the players, like John said. So if you put all together all these elements, so the player first, then the strategy to attack the right players, and the technology to support these strategies, then you have the chance, even if you don't have, as I said before, the money as the big operators, to actually get your piece of the cake. All right, so thank you so much. And I'm so happy that I had Tom Galanis here, who I know from 2008 or something like that, and it's been a while. So
it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much for your inputs. It has been one great session with 1,200 viewers on YouTube who are still hanging on, and I think they are also waiting for the US updates, compliance updates, which are in the next session. So Jeremy, nice to see you. Thank you, guys.
Cheers all.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Zoltán.
All right, so